Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Zionism and Palestine Part 2, follow-up to our first webinar we held at the end of February. Welcome, everyone. My name is Alicia Rinkowska. I'm the Development Coordinator at Christian Peacemaker Teams. So for those of you who are new here and haven't watched our Zionism and Palestine webinar Part 1, I'm going to be pasting that link in the chat box. As well as an email address that you can send any follow-up questions to, and also a donation page for CPT if you do feel like you can contribute to our work. Just wanted to touch base on a little housekeeping before we get started. So during this hour, we want to dedicate more time to answering your questions that you might have and give you the opportunity to speak directly to Rabbi Linda and Pastor Amy. So if you have a question, we're going to ask that you use the raise hand function. And if you'd like to as well, you can also use the Q&A box. So you can use either of those functions. If you do use the raise hand functions, what we will do is unmute you so you can speak out loud and ask the question directly. If you prefer not to speak out loud, you can use the Q&A box and we will read that question out for you on your behalf. Just a little bit of background on CPT. So we're an organization that trains everyday people to work in local peacemaking communities that are confronting situations of lethal conflict, partnering with them to transform violence and oppression. I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our presenters, Pastor Amy Yoder McGloughlin and Rabbi Linda Holtzman. So Amy is the pastor at Friesen Mennonite Church in Pennsylvania, and she serves on the CPT steering committee. Since 2015, Amy has been leading multi-faith delegations to Palestine with CPT. Rabbi Linda is the organizer of Tikkun Olam Havurah, a group that pursues social justice work together as a community. She's on the faculty of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and serves on the board of directors for Jewish Voice for Peace. So Amy and Rabbi Linda have traveled together to Palestine twice and will be continuing their discussion through their experiences there and how they see Zionism impacting the Palestinian community. And Rabbi Linda will begin today's webinar by welcoming in the Shabbat, which is the Jewish Sabbath. So once again, if you have any questions, please use either the raise hand option or the Q&A box, whichever your preference is. And just to add that we will have our CPT Administrative Director, Muriel Schmid, and our Canada Coordinator, Rachelle Friesen, helping with the Q&A portion of today's webinar. And I'll turn it over to you, Rabbi Linda, to welcome in the Shabbat with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. When we last spoke, I loved being in dialogue with Pastor Amy, and we had a great time having a conversation that reminded both of us about our experiences together in Israel-Palestine and how deeply both emotionally moving and spiritually moving those experiences were. When the possibility of having tonight's conversation take place on Shabbat, on the Jewish Sabbath, on what for us is the holiest day in the week, it felt exactly right. Yeah. We are living right now in very strange times, and in times where we're not getting out to connect with each other in ways that we usually do. That, for me, makes the Shabbat particularly important. This is a day when we stop, we focus, we look inside, we mark time. We note that a week has passed, and time has been so strange in these past weeks that now to take a moment and say, yeah, another week has passed and we're here and we're whole and we're moving towards deeper understanding both of Israel-Palestine and of ourselves and of our larger world. And here we have an opportunity to do it together, felt exactly right for Shabbat, for the Jewish Sabbath. So we begin our day in a few ways. First of all, we begin it in the evening, which is an interesting time to begin a day. But the way that Jewish days start, they always start as you move into darkness, and then they end the next night around the same time. As we move into this new day, we do so with blessing, and we do so with light. And the blessing is one that we take for ourselves just from the universe and from all that we are able to give ourselves and from God, and that we give to each other. So I'd like to ask you to start this moment by, if you are by yourself in a home, hold in your hearts the blessings that you hope for yourself for this coming day. And if you are with those you love or with others or sharing a place, what would you like to bless them with just over this next day? And then we take those blessings and we translate them into light. And we light candles to start the day. So I'm going to light. And the candles that I'm lighting are special Shabbat candles that are particularly devoted to giving. Any profit that comes from those candles goes to Palestine. And I hope you can see them. There are two candles that are linked for two of the major ways that we observe the Shabbat, the Sabbath, taking it all in and all the blessing in. And then as those candles separate and the lights glow even brighter on their own, we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ruach haolam, asher kichanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, source of light, our God, the power of the universe, who's made us holy and who has commanded us to bring light into this day and into our lives. And we say, Amen.
Thanks for doing that, Linda. As Alicia said, this is the continuation of a conversation that we held about a month and a half ago, which seems about 70 years ago compared to where we are now. But I just wanted to set the tone, let you know what our definitions are of different terms that we're talking about. So I'm gonna share my screen. All right, so Zionism, according to Rabbi Linda from our last time together, the belief that the land of Israel and the Jewish people have a special relationship. And that relationship is expressed in different ways for different people. It can be a deep spiritual connection, a cultural connection, or a historic one. And since 1948, the most powerful aspect of Zionism has been political Zionism, manifested in the creation of the state of Israel, which many Jews support. So that's directly from your mouth a few weeks ago, Linda. One of the other aspects of Zionism is Christian Zionism, and that is the belief that Christ will not return to us via the second coming until all Jews have returned to the state of Israel. So Christians must do all they can do to make sure that the Jews get back to the Holy Land. This is not a universal Christian belief, but it is a belief in parts of Christianity. There's an organization called Christians United for Israel, CUFI, and they are really pushing this theology that is informing a political stance. So that's what we were talking about when we were together a few weeks ago, and we're going to hope to continue that conversation. But before we do that, Linda, you had some things to share about Gaza.
Just one little thing before we jump into questions and answers and continue the conversation where we left off, and that is that since we left off, COVID-19 has taken over our universe. And while it is incredibly difficult and painful and frightening for all of us, for the people of Gaza, it has been even more so. Yeah. And in Gaza, the virus is now spreading, and that's terrifying. It's terrifying because, as we know, Gaza is essentially, and has been described by many as the largest open-air prison in the world, that there are so many people crammed into such a small space. And because of the oppression that Gaza faces, because of what Israel has been doing with them and for so long, the healthcare system has largely fallen apart, and there will be no way for Gaza to stand up and to fight off the disease. That we feel as if in the United States we don't have nearly enough equipment. In Gaza, there's barely electricity. There's no more fully potable water. It was very clear a while ago, the date that was set where by many saying that Gaza would be uninhabitable by was 2020. And we've now reached 2020. And on top of that, there is this pandemic. So for people in Gaza, this is for so many a death sentence. And our hearts certainly are going out to the people of Gaza. And we hope that more than that, we hope that every time there is an opportunity for us to donate funds, for us to speak out, for us to stand up, the people of Gaza need us now more than ever.
So I think now we're going to take questions that people have. I think we have some that were lingering from the last webinar that we did. So Uriel or Alicia, if you have those questions, I invite you to share them with us now.
Yes, so thank you for this introduction. And yes, we had last time a question that was for both of you. Someone was asking about the reception of your positions and stand towards Palestine, Israel in your own communities, and how you are received in your own communities, and how is your position received in your own communities. So if you can say something about that.
Amy, you want to start?
Sure. I think it's probably, I guess it depends on where I am, how it's received. I find myself being very careful because I want to be a person that can have conversations with anyone. So I'm very careful about how I start conversations. I'm in ecumenical and interfaith circles quite often with folks who are not at all where I am, and I try to make some space for that. And if I can come into that with the spirit of openness, but also making it clear where I am, I find that that works pretty well. I haven't had too many experiences where folks are like, you know, that's terrible. That usually happens more in Hebron when I'm visiting there with CPT, but here it's, for me, it's been about how I enter into the conversation with people.
Yeah, for me, it's completely different. The Jewish community has not been, as a whole, receptive to harsh critiques of Israel or to my saying that I'm not a Zionist. And I spent years turning myself into a pretzel to try to fit into the Jewish community in a more full and complete way around Israel-Palestine. I would not share my view very loudly publicly. I would limit it. I would always say, oh, of course I love Israel, but and I would never stand up and just say, you know, I'm really not a Zionist. I do not think that the Jewish community should be the sole recipients of the power of a state anywhere in the world. I don't think that any one community should have a state that is a religious state. I don't think that's a healthy way to be. And I think that to be a democracy and to be a religious country, I think they're mutually exclusive. When I finally started saying that more publicly, what I found is that a lot of people thought it anyway about me, and that they were guessing, they were thinking, she doesn't really love Israel the way she says she does. They were wrong about that. I really loved Israel the way I said I did. And loving Israel and believing that the Jews have a special relationship with Israel as a state are two different things. And the Jewish community as a whole, the establishment Jewish community, is not receptive to a non-Zionist or anti-Zionist position. I'm on the board and very active in Jewish Voice for Peace, and often the Jewish world doesn't even see it as a Jewish organization or an organization that has the right to exist. I've been called an anti-Semite. I've been told that I'm destroying the Jewish people. Not just me. Everyone I know in the Jewish world who has taken this position, the position of not being a Zionist, has been told the same things. We're often told that we're continuing the work of Hitler, that we are destroying the Jews, and that we're doing it because the state of Israel is the only completely safe place for the Jewish community. And when we see a rise in anti-Semitism in both the rest of the world and the United States, the Jewish community gets even more frightened and says, no, Israel is the only possible safe place. You can't be openly critical of Israel. That's a horrible thing. And it's not an accepted view. So I find that even often with those people who don't support the occupation, they still are not comfortable with someone who says, I'm not a Zionist. That they can say, no, we don't like what Israel's doing, but we certainly think that Israel is a special Jewish state. And even they think that what those of us who are in favor of boycott and divestment and sanctions, who are in favor of BDS, are doing something harmful and destructive. I think that it stood in my way in many ways, certainly in my career in the rabbinate and in my life in the Jewish community. It has been the issue that is the most difficult for me in the Jewish world. I never thought it would. When I first went to rabbinical school and I was coming out as a lesbian, I thought that was going to be the most difficult issue I would face in the Jewish world. And lo and behold, it was surpassed.
Okay, thank you for those answers to the questions. We are going to move to one of the hands that has been raised. And I apologize if I pronounce names wrong, deepest apologies. Chava Finkler, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question. Go ahead. Oh.
Hey, thank you. I'm curious about whether Rabbi Holtzman is also a citizen of Israel, as opposed to a visitor, because I'm considered an Israeli citizen, and the Israeli consulate here would specifically not give me a passport. And when I pointed out to them, this is what it says on your website. You know the number of the Teudat Zahut, the identity card for my mom. So why don't you want to give me a passport? And they refused.
Did they say why they refused, Chava?
No, they just said to me, if you want your passport, go to Israel.
That's very interesting. So there should be, and there is, if you want citizenship in Israel, I gather that you're Jewish, just from that's presumptive, but your name and your description of the Teudat Zechut of your mother's, identity card, automatically you should be able to have citizenship if you want. I'm not so sure that's a good thing, but you should be able to. And I've never tried, so I don't know. I don't really want citizenship in this state of Israel. When I go, I just go as a visitor.
I wanted to clarify that the reason that I was asking and trying to determine my status is because I wanted to go with CPT. But if you're considered an Israeli citizen, then you can't go to Area A. So
that's right.
On one hand, it's a good thing not to be a citizen, but I was concerned that they would then arrest me when I got there or something.
That's really interesting. And that they could possibly, but they obviously won't because they're not considering you a citizen. So I think that it's worth your going with CPT. The other thing is that what I found when I went to Israel, Palestine with CPT is that no one paid any attention to me whatsoever. No officials actually cared where I went, when I went, or what I did. And my guess is that would be the case for you, although I'm certainly not an Israeli official, so I can't claim that officially. But I don't think that if you entered Area A that suddenly someone would pop out and say, that's it, you're under arrest. And unless you've gone to Israel and claimed citizenship, I believe you're not officially a citizen, so you're okay.
So we can go to the next raised hand. It's Felix Almeida, and I'm going to allow to talk, and so you can ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I am deeply interested in the teachings of Judaism, and I would like to know, what does Judaism profess with respect to the interdependency of humanity?
I lost what you were saying. To the interdependency of humanity, you said?
You didn't hear me correctly, did you?
Okay.
Or you didn't hear me because I was chopping out?
You were chopping a little bit. That's why I was just clarifying.
Okay, and you're chopping out as well now. So I'll try and speak slowly. What does Judaism profess with respect to the interdependency of humanity?
Thank you. It's a great question. The challenges with a question like that are that there is not one Judaism, and there's not one way that Judaism professes something about the interdependence of humanity. In fact, different Jewish groups are very different about the issue of interdependence. Everybody sees all of us as part of one world and of responsible for the earth and caring for the earth, of caring for the environment, of making a difference in that larger sense. As far as action in different groups, Orthodox Jews tend to be Jewish first, right? Tend to do more acts of caring and of social justice within the Jewish community, believing that while we are all interdependent, that we all also really need to focus on ourselves and on our own, and that we need to look at ourselves and take care of ourselves first. Other more progressive groups within Judaism, like the Reconstructionist group that I'm a part of, the Reconstructionism, Reform Judaism, really do believe that while we celebrate as Jews, while we care about Jews, and while we need to take care of the Jewish people, we are all one, and we all need to take care of each other and work together for each other. That's probably why more Reconstructionist Jews are involved in Israel-Palestine work than others, than Orthodox Jews are, because more progressive Jews tend to believe that we are responsible not just for the Jews who are living in Israel, but for all of the people who are living there, just like in the rest of the world.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go to one of the questions that was asked in the question and answer section. I mean, as we know, Israel has imprisoned Palestinian children before. A couple weeks ago, there was a youth that was shot and killed. And so what is the latest update in holding Israel accountable to these things?
I'm not sure if I have the answer to that. Do you, Linda?
No, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the latest update. There certainly are groups within Israel, Palestine, that are constantly trying to hold Israel accountable. There's a group called B'Tselem that does so by just taking note and marking every single instance of discrimination and oppression of Palestinians that are committed by Israel. There are other groups that do exactly that on a constant basis.
No Way to Treat a Child, I think, is the organization that we visited with.
Yeah, absolutely, and they do as well on a constant basis. So going on either of their websites, you would get the what's happening right now immediately. I'm not sure.
We can go to the next raised hand. It's Mervin Horst. So I'm going to allow you to talk.
Merv Horst is unmuted, calling in from Briarwood, Queens, in the wonderful city of New York. I had an experience. I broke my ankle, and so I was put in rehab at the Hebrew Home in Riverdale, New York. I found the engagement very interesting. I took place in all of the Bible studies. We studied the weekly Torah portion every Wednesday. I just don't know how objectively to engage the Jewish faith, talking about the things in the Torah that seem to be exactly like manifest destiny in the United States. I'm a Mennonite Christian and pretty convinced of that. Amy has met me personally. So I don't know how is the best, I guess my question is, how is the best way to instill objectivity? I see the portions in the Torah as being like an antiquated view of God. Forgive me, Rabbi Linda, if that sounds, anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic. I don't mean that in any way at all. And I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, I don't hear that as at all anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish at all, not at all. My view of the Torah, and the Torah is the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, and it's the part of the Hebrew Bible that the Jewish community sees as the most sacred and the most central. My view of the Torah is very similar to yours. And when I read parts of the Torah, when I read the Torah at all, I say, this was written by human beings who were striving for godliness in their life, who were trying to live a holy life. And they were doing it in the way that their society led them to do it, in the way that they knew best. And for us to read it today, what we need to do is to translate all of that, not take it literally as, yes, they said then that God gave the land to us, therefore the land is ours, but to look at it now and say, well, what did it mean for those people when it says that God gave them the land? How did they feel? How did they deal with it? What did it mean that they felt as if this land was special to them? And then what can we do to say, yeah, how do we feel about that concept? We might love the idea that there's land that's special to us, and we might not. we might say, you know, we don't think that that's the way to lead the holiest life. So we're going to say, no, we don't agree with that. What we do agree with is that the way that we treat land is special, and that the way we treat humans are special, and that understanding land as sacred and our relationship to it as sacred, we believe that that is true. But the exact way they did in the ancient Near East is not the way we need to do it now. So I don't see you as any way anti-Semitic. You'd be a perfectly good Jew. You're thinking exactly what I think. So yeah, Amy, do you have a thought about that? Oh, you know, well, let me just say one more thing. And the one more thing is, I don't know how to say that to someone who believes that God gave the Torah to the people of Israel and that it is literally true. Because I could say that until I turn blue and no one's going to hear it. So it really depends on who you're talking to. You know, the Jewish community, as I said once before tonight, is not one. It's very diverse, it's very open, and people think lots of different things. So you can talk to many Jews and you'll be on the same exact wavelength. And then some will not get what you're saying and will say, how can you deny this connection?
Yeah.
So go ahead, Amy, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think for Christians, one of the things that we struggle with is that we have our own manifest destiny opinions about the Hebrew scripture too, and they have their tentacles are very deep into our own theology. And so our own work is to decolonize the text and to read it in a new way. I said this in the last webinar, but the book that has been extremely helpful for me has been Mitri Raheb's book, Faith in the Face of Empire. I encourage all of you to read it, share it with your friends, give it out for Christmas presents. It's a Palestinian Christian perspective on the biblical text, and it has started for me to help unravel some of those theologies that feel like they sometimes have a chokehold on my faith.
Okay, so we're actually really lucky. One of our partners from Hebron is actually joining us on this call. So Hamid is on this call from the Hebron International Resource Network. And he has said that he would be willing to give us a bit of an update about what's happening on the ground, both in terms of coronavirus and the situation there. So I'm gonna unmute you, Hamid, and also feel free to, if you do have a question, feel free to ask a question, but we really want to listen and learn from you and hear what's going on. And we're just so honored that you joined us for this call.
Welcome, Hamid.
Is that okay? I can hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yeah. Well, it's really great to be with you. Good to see you guys, and I'm really looking forward for this epidemic to be over with, so we can actually see you here again in Hebron.
Inshallah.
Inshallah soon. Now, very quickly regarding what is happening here is that we have been under lockdown, I think, for the past 10 to 12 days, in which that we have very much limited time space in which that we can move. We move only between 10 o'clock and 2 on daily basis, and this is only to get you know, the needed things for the house. Even from my work at the UN, we've been actually in the house for, we have not been able to access our office for the past 16 days because they also just put us on a lockdown for all of our operations. So most of the time that we are functioning over Zoom, too many meetings in order for us to actually to see the impact of the epidemic and try to fight it throughout of the West Bank and Gaza. But in Hebron, we've actually only earlier this evening, we discovered about 2 more cases in Halhul, which is just in the north of Hebron, and in Hebron itself we have 3. So we have, you know, a total of about 5 between us and Halhul, and that is, we are very, very scared, to be honest. At this point, we are anticipating about 35,000 workers that are going to be coming back from Israel because of the Easter, the Pesach holiday. And they're supposed to be coming back as of today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, within these few days. And the sheer volume of that large number of workers coming back. I mean, I don't know if you've heard that a couple of days ago that there was 15 of them that they were working in Atarot, in a chicken factory that actually came back, and they did not go through the procedures, and we ended up with about 15 of them that actually do have the virus. And that is the fear is that a lot of them do not have that, let's say, level of commitment, I would say, that they would not want to go through the regular channels and go, because right now the instruction is that once you come back from Israel, then you're going to have to go into quarantine in the house for about 14 days. You know, staying away from your family in an isolated room. And I don't know how many of them will actually try to see this as serious as it is and actually go through with these steps. So the fear is that once they're coming back, that we are going to have a marked increase in the number of affected people, because they don't affect themselves only, but the entire families and stuff like that. So, and as you know, I mean, my understanding is that in the West Bank, in general, we have only 200 respirators. And any kind of an outbreak is going to really test our ability. And we know that we're going to fail in that, that if we were tested, that our health systems is not going to be able to face up to that. So this is why there's a lot of attention or a lot of pressure or a lot of awareness is being raised about having to actually to stop it from actually being spreading. That we need to be able to know that, you know, if you're coming back from flying from anywhere, quarantine yourself for 14 days, and has to be strict, because if we end up with the spread of that I think that the problems are going to be much, much bigger than what we have right now. So far, we have it under control, but with the coming back of the workers, I think that we're going to see more and more cases, God forbids. So this is what is happening in Hebron. The Halhul is closed by now. Hebron is closed. Even internal roads are being blocked off just to make sure that nobody beyond 2 o'clock. You have 10 till 2, and that's about it. Not everything is open. Everything is shut down except for bakeries, pharmacies, shops, you know, supermarkets, and maybe the banks. That is it. So, and today we ended up with another declaration from the president and the prime minister to extend the case of emergency and for an additional 30 days. So for an additional 30 days, you know, kids and the wife and families are going to be locked inside the house until, you know, this epidemic, you know, passes by, inshallah soon.
Thanks for that update.
Pleasure.
Hamid, and just a follow-up question for that. A lot of us on this call were supporters of Palestine. What can we do in moments like this to keep our support going?
There's a lot of effort on the ground that is being carried out by small organizations like my own. I don't want to blow my own horns, but it seems that, and this is very much anticipated, that more and more people are going through this, you know, with kids staying at the house, with people are not going to be able to access their job places, because right now all of the private sector, for the most part, is not functioning. Even the governmental institutions, nobody is actually going into the houses, into the work. Of course, that's not going to cut up their salaries, but according to the Prime Minister today, that because of the lack of trade, because that you do not have all of these shops that are open, so the Palestinians in general do not import, and especially because also Israel is not very cooperative in terms of getting the food stuff, not the food stuff, sorry, the imported stuff actually going through the ports. So that means that the Palestinian Authority would not be able to collect the taxes from these imports, which means that, again, they probably are not going to be, they paid the salaries for this month, but as the Prime Minister said, that we're expecting that for the next month, if no intervention is going to take place, that we are not going to be able to pay for the salaries for the public sector. Now, the private sector, I know that these days, I mean, the more and more requests that are coming, at least to myself, are asking for food parcels. That whoever had it, I mean, it was already bad before the pandemic, and then now we get like something from Wadi al-Hussein in Hebron. We get something from even something from Bethlehem, saying that the capacity to deal with this, we have been exhausted. You have the kids, for example, they don't go to school, so they stay at home, and with that, there's more and more consumption of food items. So I think at this point in time that and we highlighted that with World Food, with the WFP, World Food Program. But the problem with these big organizations is that it really does take a lot of time and a lot of bureaucracy. And believe me, we've been in meetings day in and day out in order for something to actually take place. So by the time that actually that aid is going to be delivered, or that the aid is going to be distributed, you already have a large number of families that are really are not keeping up to their usual intake on a daily basis. I mean, if like workers, if you most of them, if you work this day, then you eat. If you don't work that day, then you're not going to be able to bring food to your kids. So this is the issue of food parcels is very huge. And the second one is actually hygiene kits. We've been working with the issue with Masafri Yatta, the area of Masafri Yatta in the South Urban Hills. And if you know what's happening here, it's a very way of all of the quote-unquote illegal workers who go inside or to go to Israel to work without having the proper permits. They will go through that area, and that means that if there's going to be any, God forbid, any contraction of the virus, is probably going to come from that area, because the workers are going to re-enter illegally into the West Bank, and they're not going to be checked, and most likely they're not going to go into quarantine. So we want to, one of the requests was to actually to at least synthesize or to spray the area of Masafri Yatta with chemicals, so that at least it will prevent the spread of the virus. So the issue of food parcels is one. The issue of hygiene kits for isolated communities is definitely a second one that is high up at these days. And again, as Amy and Rabbi Linda knows, that we've already done parcel distributions in isolated areas in Bethlehem, and also here in the old city of Hebron, as well as we're working with the South Urban Hills, whoever that we can, in order for them to be able to enable them to spray these chemicals, but of course more is needed.
Thank you, Hamid.
Thank you for staying up till 1:45 in the morning.
It's all part of the work.
And you don't sleep ever, but that's...
God bless coffee.
Mohammed?
But if I can, just point out to my questions, please, is that I'm very well, following up with the American elections. I want to see how much of an influence that Christian Zionism has on that, and at the same time, replying to Rabbi Linda, that we are here from the ground, are seeing that a little bit more cracks are taking place within the Jewish front in the United States. For example, you will have J Street, you will have the Jewish Center for Nonviolence, you have Quad Fink. You have more and more people that I actually see coming up from the States that are not, especially the younger generation, that are not buying, some of the narratives that are being actually put up there. And I was a little bit more hopeful with that. So can you please comment on this? Is that conceived, or that we have some hope coming in from the States?
Yeah, I can comment on that quickly and turn over for Christian Zionism and its effect on the election to Amy. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that things are changing generationally. I think that the next generation does not just automatically buy the need for Israel as a Jewish state, the danger of Palestine, all of it that their parents bought into. What I see often with the next generation is that I think a majority don't care that much, that they don't vote based on Israel-Palestine. There certainly were people who voted for Trump because they thought that he would be better on Israel. And I think that I hope that is shifting, will shift, and that the younger generation will start to vote more, so that they will have more impact, because they are people who really are starting to question it. And I do think that there's a little bit of light getting in with the next generation. So yeah, I share your hope, Haman, very much so.
And then on the Christian Zionism side, groups like CUFI, Christians United for Israel, are extremely powerful. They're a larger group than AIPAC, and they're just a very powerful lobbying group. And they worry me. And I think they do have a tremendous impact on the election. This convergence of bad Christian theology and right-wing politics, it's a bad mix. So I'm concerned about the ways that I saw them impacting the last presidential election and then this one as well. And, it's not like every more conservative Christian is like consciously pro-Israel. It's just kind of wrapped up in this package that comes in a lot of churches that tend to be more conservative. And it just, that's how I was trained with it. I grew up in this conservative household with that was pro-Israel, but we didn't really know why. We were just like, that's because it's what the Bible says. We didn't really think too consciously about it. So there's a huge group of people that are supportive of Israel, but not really paying a whole lot of attention to the why. And those are the folks that concern me in this upcoming election.
Related to Christian Zionism and Zionism, Gerald, there was a question about the reception of Christian Zionism among the Jewish communities in the U.S. and if we can comment on a little bit on that and the relationship between the two communities, two sides.
I think that Christian Zionism and the Jewish community unite around this one thing, and then I don't think they talk too much about anything else, because that starts to show the cracks. But they're united on this issue of Israel being a strong nation, and the reasons for that are not something that folks talk about too much.
There's also within the Christian Zionist community, I mean, I see anti-Semitism all the time, and like the coupling of, deep like support of Israel and for theological reasons combined with anti-Semitism. And I'm always surprised that there are members of the Jewish community who sort of buy it and who are comfortable with Christians, with the right-wing Christian Zionism, and don't seem to notice the anti-Semitism that's right there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll move to another question from Jim Haber. So I will unmute you, Jim. There we go. Go ahead, Jim.
Hi. Yeah, I'm very appreciative of CPT and visited the house run a couple of times a while ago and I've demonstrated against Kufi in Las Vegas, and I've seen shows and the Nights to Honor Israel match every dollar raised to go to birthright, which and there's also a Christian birthright, and there's a whole use of archaeology that's being used as a tool. It has for a long time, and now Christian archaeology, Jewish archaeology, all to dispossess Palestinians. I don't know if anyone was at the Friends of Seville, North America. We demonstrated against Kufi in DC. I guess my question is there any way to get the Christian Zionists to care about Palestinian Christians? Or it seems like they want to pretend like they're coming to their defense. I don't know. It gets so convoluted. And then the white nationalists, and then the Muslims, like the Wahhabi, it seems like the three of them working together. And I guess the bugaboo in the room also is nuclear weapons. They all hate Iran. And I don't know how to disentangle all of this. I'll stop and just comment, or working with FOSNA as well as CPT coming together, or is it kind of diaspora and then there and in different realms of activism?
So I'm Jim, thank you for that question. I think one of the things that I've been seeing happening is, I'm trying to remember his name. There is a group of Palestinian Christians that are actually traveling the country right now, speaking particularly in at Christian colleges and congregations, and starting to help Christians break down their unconscious theology around Israel. And that has been incredible as folks drill down a little bit. Thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan Katab and Alex Awad are Palestinian Christians that are traveling around. But once that theology starts to be broken down, folks realize, oh, this isn't really in line with who I am and what I believe about who Jesus is. And I am very grateful for folks who are willing to step into the fire there and help Christians break down their own bias. And they're even meeting with folks at high levels with Kufi and helping folks think about the impact of that theology on Palestinian Christians on the ground. And I've been really encouraged to see what's happening there.
We probably have time just for kind of conclusion. We have 6 minutes before the hour. But so in conclusion, there was a remaining question also from the last webinar that says, where do you start this conversation with people who don't agree with you? And then maybe that would be a good way to end today. If you have any experience or any tips to provide to people, like how do you engage in this conversation and try to make your point with people who don't necessarily come from the same perspective?
So I moved from Philly, which is a much more receptive place for conversations like this, to a wealthy suburb of Philadelphia. Not as easy of a place to have these conversations in interfaith groups. But I've been in conversation with a local rabbi. And one of the things that has been powerful is actually the thing that brought us together was the shootings in Pittsburgh. And I went to her CPT style and said, my congregation will surround your building on your Shabbat service. We want you to be safe. And that was an opening for us to be able to say, we care about you as humans, we love you, and we support you. And since then, we've been having regular lunches together and, trying to do things to bring our communities together. And I've said to her a couple months ago, after, a long time of being in community with her, I said, okay, we have a foundation. Can we talk about Palestine? And she kind of went, okay. But for me, it was a place to start of just saying, you know me, you know who I am, you know what I believe in. Let's talk about something that is important to all of us. Enough with the kumbaya, we can all live together in peace stuff. Let's really talk about the nitty gritty. And I'm encouraged by that, because she didn't run screaming, and we're still talking, and we are going to see this very differently. But we have to start somewhere, and starting with we're friends, we love each other. Let's talk about the hard stuff together.
That's really great. Yeah, I have three different answers. One answer is, there is an unwritten rule in my family that we don't talk about Israel-Palestine. Not my immediate family, but one step beyond. And I think that's not a bad rule. I think that there are people with whom I can't really talk about Israel-Palestine and what I feel and what I work for, because we are working on opposite things like that around Israel-Palestine, and there would not only not be understanding, there would be a total end to what has been a very loving relationship in every other way. And sometimes I think you just can't talk. Mm-hmm. Second, when you can, I think it has to be just the way you said, Amy, it has to be out of relationship. Right? It has to be because you know and trust the person with whom you're speaking. Like going to a member of the Jewish community who's not non-Zionist or anti-Zionist, who is working for Israel, and saying immediately upon meeting them, "Hi, I'm Amy. I'm not a Zionist. Pleasure to meet you." Wouldn't get you anywhere. So that's real. You're right, and that's really smart. The third is, I've found group conversations have worked when we've done a values-based conversation. When we've started with the idea, with a group of, and I teach in a rabbinical school, right? So we're training students who are going to become rabbis, with a group of students where we sat down and we've said, okay, what are the values that underlie your feelings about Israel? And what we discovered is, for those of us who are not Zionist, and for those of us who are, and for those of us who support the government, and for those of us who don't, our values don't always differ. It's the way that we apply those values and the ways that we use them. But once we understand that we all care about justice, that we all care about the sanctity of life, that we all care about humanity being treated with respect, that we all care about the land and the land being treated well, that we all care about safety, that we all care about all of these things, we can often start a conversation there. And that's been particularly powerful for me as a way to begin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Amy and Linda, of course, for giving your time one more time for this conversation. And thank you, everyone, for attending. It's been a great turnout, so that's really nice. Feel free to email us. I put the email again in the chat if you have questions that we are not able to answer, or if you want to follow up on anything. And you can also visit our website, CPT, if you want to support CPT and our work in different places. And we wish you all well, stay healthy. Shalom Shabbat for our Jewish communities. And we will be in touch with probably new webinar and new conversation. So thank you, everyone.
Good to see you all. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you all.